Have you ever watched someone change an entire league, fill arenas, break television ratings, rewrite record books, and still somehow be treated like they don't belong among the very best? Because that's exactly the question many basketball fans began asking the moment one MVP conversation exploded across social media. People weren't arguing over who should win. They were asking something even more shocking. How could Caitlin Clark not even be seriously included in the discussion? Within minutes, basketball fans flooded social media with disbelief. Some called it disrespect. Others called it politics. Many simply couldn't understand how a player who had transformed the WNBA's popularity could be overlooked in one of basketball's biggest conversations. Suddenly, the debate wasn't just about statistics anymore. It became about recognition, expectations, pressure, and whether the league was judging Caitlin Clark by a completely different standard than everyone else. But before anyone jumps to conclusions, there's a much bigger story hiding underneath the headlines. Because this isn't simply about one MVP list. It's about what happens when a rookie sensation becomes the face of an entire sport almost overnight. It's about impossible expectations. It's about changing the business of basketball while still trying to prove yourself every single night on the court. To understand why this debate became so emotional, we have to go back to where it all started. Long before the MVP discussions filled television shows and podcasts, Caitlin Clark had already become one of the most recognizable names in American sports. Her unforgettable college career attracted millions of new fans. Games that normally received little national attention suddenly became must-watch television. Families planned evenings around her games. Young players copied her deep three-pointers in driveways across the country. She wasn't just winning basketball games. She was changing how people watched women's basketball. That popularity didn't disappear when she entered the WNBA. If anything, it grew even bigger. Almost immediately, ticket demand skyrocketed wherever the Indiana Fever played. Arenas that had empty sections in previous seasons suddenly sold out. Teams moved games into larger venues just to fit the crowds. Television ratings reached numbers the league had rarely experienced before. Merchandise disappeared from stores almost as quickly as it arrived. For many casual sports fans, Caitlin Clark became their introduction to the WNBA. That created excitement, but it also created enormous pressure, because every single performance suddenly carried expectations that almost no rookie had ever faced. Every missed shot became a headline. Every turnover sparked debate. Every victory became proof for one group of fans. Every loss became proof for another. Instead of simply developing like most young players, Clark entered a spotlight where every possession was analyzed from every possible angle. Some believed she was already one of the league's brightest stars. Others argued she still had plenty to learn before receiving that kind of recognition. Both sides watched every game searching for evidence. Then something interesting began happening. Despite the constant attention, Clark's game slowly started evolving. The speed of the professional game looked overwhelming during certain stretches early in the season. Defenders were stronger. Rotations happened faster. Passing windows closed quicker than they ever had in college. Experienced veterans challenged her physically every night. Opposing coaches built defensive game plans specifically to slow her down. There were difficult games. There were frustrating moments. But there was also visible improvement. As weeks passed, Clark looked increasingly comfortable controlling offenses against elite professional defenses. Her court vision remained exceptional. Her confidence never disappeared. She continued attempting difficult passes that many players wouldn't even imagine trying. Sometimes those passes became turnovers. Other times they created highlight plays that left crowds standing before the ball even reached her teammate. That unpredictability became part of what made her so exciting. She wasn't playing cautiously. She was trying to change games. And slowly, the numbers began reflecting that growth. Her scoring improved. Her playmaking became more consistent. Her chemistry with teammates developed. She learned when to attack aggressively and when to slow the pace. The player who looked overwhelmed in certain early moments gradually transformed into someone capable of taking over entire games. Fans noticed. Analysts noticed. Opposing coaches noticed. Even opposing players acknowledged how quickly she was adapting. Yet despite all that progress, conversations surrounding Clark rarely stayed focused only on basketball. Everything around her seemed bigger. Questions about officiating. Questions about physical defense. Questions about media coverage. Questions about popularity. Questions about television ratings. Questions about league marketing. Some fans believed she received too much attention. Others believed she received unfair criticism because of that same attention. Every discussion somehow became larger than basketball itself. Then came another important turning point. Indiana began showing signs of becoming a more competitive team. Basketball has always been a team sport. Individual greatness can only go so far without teammates improving together. As the Fever developed chemistry, Clark's strengths became even more visible. Her passing created easier baskets. Fast breaks became more dangerous. Three-point shooters received cleaner looks. The offense flowed with greater confidence. Wins became more frequent. With every victory, people started asking a new question. Could Caitlin Clark actually enter the MVP conversation? At first, many dismissed the idea. Too early. Too much competition. Too many established superstars. The league featured incredible players with years of elite production. Former MVPs. Championship winners. Defensive stars. Scoring champions. Clark would have to accomplish something extraordinary to break into that group. But then the season continued. Game after game, she produced performances that reminded everyone why expectations had become so enormous in the first place. There were dazzling assists, deep three-pointers, clutch moments, games where she completely controlled the pace, games where she made teammates better simply by recognizing opportunities others couldn't see. Statistics alone didn't always capture her influence. Sometimes her greatest impact came through spacing. Defenders picked her up far beyond the three-point line. That opened driving lanes. That forced defensive adjustments. That changed entire possessions before she even touched the basketball. It's one of those contributions that doesn't always appear inside a traditional box score. Yet coaches understand exactly how valuable it can be. Meanwhile, discussions around league value became impossible to ignore. What does most valuable actually mean? Is it simply the player with the best statistics? The player on the best team? The most dominant scorer? The best defender? Or does value also include everything that player brings beyond the numbers? Different voters have answered those questions differently throughout sports history. That's why MVP debates almost always become emotional. Everyone defines value in their own way. For Clark's supporters, value extended beyond points and assists. They pointed toward sold-out arenas, historic television audiences, massive merchandise sales, growing interest from younger fans, national conversations happening almost daily. They argued no player had influenced the league's visibility quite like she had. Critics quickly responded. They insisted MVP should remain about on-court performance above everything else. Popularity shouldn't determine basketball awards. Business impact shouldn't replace basketball excellence. It was a reasonable argument. But Clark's supporters weren't saying popularity alone deserved recognition. They believed her basketball production had reached a level worthy of serious consideration. And that's where the real disagreement began. People started comparing statistics. Efficiency, assists, turnovers, scoring averages, team success, advanced metrics. Every category became another piece of evidence supporting one side or the other. Television debates intensified. Former players offered different opinions. Sports radio exploded with phone calls. Social media became even louder. Then came the moment that truly ignited everything. An MVP discussion surfaced, without Clark receiving the level of attention many expected. Some lists focused almost entirely on established stars. Others mentioned her only briefly. Several conversations barely discussed her at all. That single omission immediately became one of basketball's biggest talking points. Fans didn't simply disagree. They felt stunned. Across social media, thousands questioned how someone producing highlight performances, helping elevate her team, and bringing unprecedented attention to the league could appear almost invisible in certain MVP conversations. Some called it disrespect. Others argued voters simply valued different criteria. Neither side backed down. The disagreement grew larger every hour. Supporters highlighted memorable performances. Critics emphasized consistency. Supporters pointed toward overall influence. Critics focused on team standings. Supporters praised her ability to create offense. Critics mentioned turnovers and defensive development. Every conversation seemed to circle back toward one central question. What exactly makes an MVP? History offers surprisingly few simple answers. Some MVP winners came from dominant championship contenders. Others carried average teams almost by themselves. Some overwhelmed opponents statistically. Others impacted winning through leadership, defense, or efficiency. There has never been one perfect formula. That's why these debates continue year after year across every major sport. But with Clark, emotions felt different, because she represented something larger than one season. To millions of fans, she symbolized the future of women's basketball. Ignoring her felt, to some people, like ignoring the biggest story happening inside the sport. Meanwhile, others warned against rushing greatness. They reminded everyone that legendary careers aren't built in one season. Every superstar faced challenges early. Every all-time great earned respect gradually. Perhaps Clark simply needed more time. Perhaps future MVP awards would come naturally. That perspective also carried logic. After all, professional basketball history is filled with incredible players who developed over several seasons before reaching their peak. Yet Clark's supporters countered with another point. What if the expectations themselves had become unfair? Most young stars receive patience while adjusting. Clark seemed expected to dominate immediately. When she played brilliantly, some people treated it as expected. When she struggled, critics reacted instantly. Few athletes carried such enormous expectations from day one. That unique pressure became another part of the MVP discussion. Was she being evaluated more harshly precisely because everyone expected so much? Or were supporters simply asking for recognition before she had fully earned it? The answers depended entirely on who you asked. And that's exactly why this story captured the attention of basketball fans everywhere. Because underneath every statistic and every highlight sat a much deeper conversation about greatness, fairness, expectations, and what it truly means to be the most valuable player. As the season pushed forward, every remaining game suddenly carried even greater importance. Every explosive performance strengthened one side of the argument. Every difficult night strengthened the other. The MVP debate was no longer slowing down. In many ways, it was only beginning. And then came a stretch of games that would completely reshape the conversation once again. Before those games arrived, one thing had already become clear. The MVP debate was no longer just about numbers on a stat sheet. Every possession Caitlin Clark played was now being watched through a completely different lens. A great performance wasn't simply celebrated, it became evidence. A poor shooting night wasn't simply a bad game, it became ammunition for critics. That is the reality of being the most talked-about player in the league. And then came the stretch that forced almost everyone to pay attention. Indiana wasn't just trying to stay competitive anymore. The Fever were beginning to look like a team that believed they could beat anyone on the right night. That confidence didn't appear overnight. Earlier in the season, there were games where the offense looked disconnected. Timing was off. Passes arrived a split second late. Open shots didn't fall. The chemistry simply wasn't there. But basketball rewards patience. The more Clark played with her teammates, the more natural everything became. She started recognizing exactly where each teammate preferred to receive the ball. Her teammates learned when to cut because they knew Clark would somehow find them. Players began trusting that if they kept moving, the ball would eventually arrive. That trust changed everything. The Fever offense became faster, cleaner, more confident. Instead of looking uncertain, players attacked with purpose. And at the center of nearly every important possession was Caitlin Clark. Her scoring naturally attracted attention. The long three-pointers, the impossible passes, the highlight plays that immediately spread across social media. But coaches often talked about something viewers didn't always notice. Her decision-making. Every defense has weaknesses. The best point guards identify them before anyone else does. Clark was beginning to do exactly that. Sometimes she'd attack the basket because the help defender arrived a second too late. Sometimes she'd pull defenders toward her before delivering a pass to an open shooter. Other times she'd slow the game down completely, forcing defenders to lose patience before striking at exactly the right moment. Those aren't flashy skills. They're winning skills. And as they became more consistent, so did Indiana. Every victory added another layer to the MVP discussion. Supporters argued that Clark wasn't just putting up impressive individual numbers anymore. She was directly influencing winning basketball. That's usually where MVP conversations begin. But there was another obstacle standing in her way. Experience. The WNBA is filled with players who have spent years proving themselves. Champions, Olympians, former MVPs, defensive legends, veteran leaders who had already built remarkable careers. Many analysts believed those players still deserved to remain ahead in the MVP race. Not because Clark wasn't talented, because sustained excellence matters. One incredible stretch doesn't erase years of greatness from established stars. That argument made perfect sense. Yet Clark kept giving people reasons to question it. Night after night, she delivered moments that reminded everyone why expectations had been so high from the beginning. There were games where she completely controlled the pace from the opening tip. There were fourth quarters where she refused to let Indiana lose. There were passes that seemed impossible until the replay showed exactly how she saw an opening no one else recognized. Every time critics questioned whether she belonged among the league's elite, another performance seemed to answer them. Fans noticed. Former players noticed. Even opponents started speaking about the challenge of guarding her. Several defenders explained that Clark forces defenses to make uncomfortable decisions. Guard her too closely, and she'll drive past you. Give her space, and she'll launch a deep three. Send extra defenders, and she'll find the open teammate. There isn't an easy answer. That kind of pressure affects an entire defense. Even on nights when her shooting wasn't perfect, defenders remained focused on stopping her. That alone created opportunities for everyone else. Those are the details that don't always appear inside traditional statistics. They're difficult to measure, but they matter. As discussions continued, another question slowly entered the conversation. Should the definition of valuable include changing the entire environment around a league? It's a fascinating debate. Some fans insisted the answer should always be no. Basketball awards should stay on the basketball court. Nothing else. Others believed value is exactly what the word suggests. If one player increases attendance, attracts new viewers, boosts television ratings, inspires young athletes, and also performs at an elite level, isn't that another form of value? Neither side completely agreed. And perhaps that's why the conversation became so passionate. Everyone was using the same word, value, but everyone meant something slightly different. Meanwhile, Clark herself rarely added fuel to the debate. After games, her focus remained surprisingly consistent. She talked about improving, learning, winning, helping teammates. She often redirected praise toward the team rather than herself. That approach impressed many observers. Despite constant media attention, she generally avoided making herself the center of controversy. Instead, she returned to work. Practice, film study, preparation. Then another game arrived. Another sold-out arena. Another crowd filled with young fans wearing number 22 jerseys. For many children in attendance, seeing Clark play wasn't simply entertainment. It was inspiration. Parents spoke about daughters asking to play basketball after watching her. Youth programs reported growing participation. Local communities experienced increased excitement around girls' basketball. Those moments rarely influence award voting, but they influence the future of the sport. That reality remained impossible to ignore. At the same time, critics reminded everyone that popularity should never replace production. Fortunately for Clark's supporters, production wasn't disappearing. If anything, it continued improving. Her confidence looked stronger than ever. She attacked defenders without hesitation. She trusted her shot. She embraced pressure. The biggest moments never seemed to scare her. If anything, they appeared to energize her. Great players often share that quality. Pressure becomes motivation. Instead of shrinking, they become more aggressive. Clark repeatedly displayed that mentality. Still, every MVP candidate faces adversity. For Clark, that adversity often came through physical defense. Professional basketball is demanding. Defenders challenge every possession. Screens are harder. Contact is stronger. Space disappears faster. Clark absorbed plenty of tough moments. Hard fouls. Aggressive pressure. Constant attention from defenders determined to make every possession difficult. Rather than changing her style, she kept attacking. That resilience became another reason fans admired her. Not because she never struggled, because she continued competing despite the struggles. Every athlete experiences difficult nights. Champions respond by returning stronger. Clark seemed determined to do exactly that. As the regular season continued, sports television dedicated entire segments to one question. Is Caitlin Clark being overlooked? Some analysts answered yes immediately. Others strongly disagreed. The discussions became more detailed. They compared efficiency ratings, playmaking impact, win shares, defensive metrics, strength of schedule, quality of opponents. The deeper the analysis became, the less obvious the answer appeared. That's usually a sign of a genuine MVP race. If the winner were obvious, nobody would still be arguing. Instead, every new game reshaped opinions. One dominant performance pushed Clark higher in some rankings. Another great night from another superstar balanced the race again. Nothing felt settled. Then social media entered the picture once more. Clips of Clark's biggest highlights spread everywhere. Long-distance three-pointers, no-look assists, clutch baskets, crowds erupting after another spectacular play. Millions watched, millions shared, millions commented. Supporters argued these moments proved she belonged among basketball's very best. Critics responded that highlight clips don't capture an entire season. Both sides had valid points. Highlights create excitement. Consistency wins awards. Clark needed both. Fortunately for Indiana, consistency seemed to be arriving at exactly the right time. The team's confidence continued growing. Players celebrated each other's success. Defensive communication improved. Close games no longer felt impossible to win. Momentum is a powerful force in sports. Once teams believe they belong, everything changes. The Fever looked increasingly comfortable under pressure, and Clark looked increasingly comfortable leading them. The conversation gradually shifted. Instead of asking whether she belonged in the MVP discussion, people started asking just how high she should be ranked. That was a significant change. Only weeks earlier, some believed she wasn't ready for the conversation at all. Now respected analysts openly debated whether she deserved to climb even higher. The transformation happened because of one simple reason: performance. No amount of popularity can sustain an MVP argument without elite basketball. Clark kept providing the basketball. Every game strengthened her case. Every improvement silenced some critics. Not all, but enough to keep the debate alive. Yet just as momentum seemed to be building in her favor, another wave of discussion was about to change everything once again. A new ranking, a new reaction, and a response from fans that nobody saw coming. The reaction was immediate. Within hours of the latest MVP discussion making the rounds online, basketball fans were debating everywhere. Sports talk shows opened with the story. Podcasts spent entire episodes discussing it. Social media timelines filled with clips, statistics, and passionate opinions. Some fans believed Caitlin Clark had clearly earned more respect. Others believed the conversation had become driven by emotion instead of basketball. But beneath all the noise was one simple reality. The season wasn't over. No debate on television could change what happened on the court. Only the players could do that. And Clark understood it better than anyone. Instead of responding publicly to every opinion, she continued preparing for the next game. That mindset has followed her throughout her career. Whether people praised her or criticized her, the answer remained the same. Play basketball. Improve. Compete. Win. It's a simple philosophy. But maintaining it while millions of people analyze every performance is anything but simple. Every arena she entered felt different. Fans arrived early. Children held homemade signs. Many wore Indiana Fever jerseys. Some had traveled hundreds of miles just to watch her play once. Others had never attended a WNBA game before. That kind of attention creates enormous responsibility. Every young fan hopes to witness something unforgettable. Every opposing team wants to spoil the moment. Clark had to balance both realities every single night. As the regular season reached its most important stretch, every possession carried extra meaning. Playoff positioning mattered. Individual awards mattered. Team chemistry mattered. Momentum mattered. There was no room for distractions. The Fever needed their best basketball. And Clark responded by playing with increasing confidence. She wasn't trying to prove every critic wrong with one spectacular shot. She simply trusted the game. If the defense collapsed, she passed. If defenders backed away, she shot. If teammates had better opportunities, she found them. The game slowed down. That's often the biggest sign that a young star is growing. Instead of forcing difficult plays, they begin recognizing exactly when each opportunity appears. Clark's patience became just as dangerous as her shooting. Defenders could no longer predict what she would do next. That uncertainty made Indiana's offense even more effective. Her teammates benefited. Open shots became more common. Fast breaks became smoother. The entire offense flowed with greater rhythm. Winning basketball rarely depends on one player doing everything alone. It depends on one player making everyone around them better. That is one reason so many people believed Clark deserved serious MVP consideration. Not because she scored the most points every night, because her presence elevated the entire team. Even opponents acknowledged the challenge. Coaches praised her vision. Players respected her competitiveness. Defenses built entire game plans around slowing her down. That's often one of the clearest signs of greatness. When an opponent changes its entire strategy because of one player, that player is creating value beyond the box score. Still, the MVP race remained incredibly competitive. The WNBA featured outstanding stars producing remarkable seasons. Several players had legitimate cases based on scoring, defense, efficiency, leadership, and team success. That reality shouldn't be ignored. Award races are rarely simple. More than one player can deserve recognition. That's why reasonable people often disagree. One voter may prioritize winning. Another may value individual dominance. Another may focus on consistency from the first game through the last. Different perspectives naturally create different rankings. But Clark's supporters weren't asking everyone to agree she should automatically win. Many simply believed she deserved to be included in the conversation alongside the league's biggest stars. For them, being left out of serious MVP discussions felt difficult to understand considering her production and influence. As the debate continued, something interesting happened. People began separating two different conversations. The first asked whether Caitlin Clark had transformed the popularity of the WNBA. On that question, there was little disagreement. Attendance increased. Television audiences grew. Media attention expanded dramatically. New fans discovered the league. The second conversation asked whether those accomplishments should affect MVP voting. That answer remained far more complicated. Some believed absolutely not. Others believed overall value naturally includes broader impact. Neither position disappeared. Instead, they existed side by side. Perhaps that's what made the discussion so fascinating. It wasn't simply about statistics. It was about philosophy. How should greatness be measured? By numbers, by victories, by influence, by leadership, or by some combination of all those qualities? Sports have wrestled with that question for generations. There has never been one perfect answer. Meanwhile, Clark continued doing the only thing she could control: playing basketball. Every game became another opportunity, another chance to improve, another chance to help Indiana win, another chance to let her performance speak louder than online arguments. That approach earned respect from many people around the league. Regardless of where someone placed her in the MVP race, few questioned her work ethic. Few questioned her competitiveness. Few questioned her passion for the game. Those qualities are difficult to measure statistically, but teammates and coaches often value them tremendously. As the final weeks approached, one thing became increasingly obvious. The conversation surrounding Caitlin Clark had already become much larger than a single award. She represented the next generation of women's basketball. Young athletes watched her. Television networks invested in the league. Sponsors increased their involvement. Communities embraced women's basketball with renewed excitement. None of those developments guaranteed an MVP trophy, but they demonstrated something equally important. The sport was growing, and Clark had undeniably played a major role in that growth. History often remembers more than award winners. It remembers moments, players who changed expectations, athletes who inspired future generations, competitors who expanded the reach of their sport. Clark appeared well on her way toward becoming one of those figures. Whether she won MVP this season or not, her career was only beginning. That perspective sometimes gets lost during heated debates. Fans understandably focus on today's rankings, today's awards, today's headlines, but legendary careers are built across many seasons. Every challenge teaches something. Every criticism provides motivation. Every success creates new expectations. Clark will likely experience all of those again. That's part of greatness. The spotlight never disappears. Learning to thrive inside it becomes another skill. If her journey has shown anything so far, it's that she embraces difficult moments rather than avoiding them. Every obstacle has become another opportunity to grow. Every doubter has become another source of motivation. Every expectation has pushed her to improve. Perhaps that's why so many people believe her best basketball still lies ahead. As for the MVP debate itself, reasonable fans will probably continue disagreeing. Some will always believe she deserved stronger consideration. Others will point toward different candidates with equally compelling cases. That's part of sports. Debates create passion. Passion creates interest. Interest helps the game continue growing. But one conclusion feels difficult to argue against. Caitlin Clark has already changed the conversation around women's basketball. She has brought millions of new eyes to the league. She has inspired countless young players. She has delivered unforgettable performances on some of basketball's biggest stages. And she has shown remarkable resilience under extraordinary pressure. Whether that results in an MVP award this season is ultimately determined by voters. What cannot be voted on is her impact. That has already been felt across arenas, television screens, youth basketball courts, and communities throughout the country. Sometimes history begins with a trophy. Sometimes history begins with changing the way people see a sport. For many fans, Caitlin Clark has already accomplished the second. The awards will come and go. The debates will eventually fade. New seasons will begin. New stars will emerge. But this chapter will likely be remembered as the moment when one player helped push the WNBA into a new era of attention and opportunity, while continuing to develop into one of the league's brightest talents. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson hidden beneath the entire MVP debate. Recognition is important. Awards matter, but lasting influence is measured differently. It's measured by the people inspired, the fans who started watching, the children who picked up a basketball, the teammates who became better, the opponents forced to adapt, the league that continued growing. Those achievements cannot be captured by a single list. They become part of basketball history itself.